Now we are going to have our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Evan Williams. Dr. Williams has been in our community for quite a while, and he has been part of this community and has supported this community. Sometimes you don't always see him going out, but when you see somebody like Dr. Evans Williams coming to occasions like this, it means it is something very, very serious. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Evan Williams, who is going to be our keynote speaker. We'll not get time again. We'll not get time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dabo, for that warm introduction. You know, I feel very welcome already. When Mr. Bannister called me and told me that I was going to give this talk, invited me to give this talk, I asked him what he wanted me to talk about. He said, you can talk about anything. So I came with my bases covered. And what I want to talk about, everybody has talked about, which means I covered my bases very well. Okay, so in football, you have, in soccer, you have this indefatigable midfielder, call it midfielder. He's the enforcer. So I'm going to be the enforcer tonight. And I'm going to put in a different perspective everything somebody has has covered. Just to make my point, Mrs. Mabel Stevens, John, Mrs. Nemaun Stevens White, platform guests, my fellow Sierra Leoneans, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, well-wishers. I want to say thank you to the President, Mrs. Mabel Stevens John, and members of his executive for inviting me to speak to you this evening on the initiative of developing the Siaka Stevens Presidential Center in Sierra Leone. I'm honored to be here. It is a rare chance in any professional career to have the opportunity to be able to to address an occasion like this. Of course, even in the United States, how many presidential libraries are there? There are only 13 presidential libraries, And here I am, one of the people addresses an event that initiates the development of the Siaka Stevens Center in Sierra Leone. It is also a rare opportunity for the organizers, to be able to be involved in the envisioning, in the planning and the development, of anything from scratch, anything new, much more a monumental task like developing a presidential center. I would say to Dina that you have done yourself proud. I thank them for having the vision and foresight to initiate the project. To the best of my knowledge, the Siaka Stevens Presidential Center will only be the second in all of Africa, the only other one being the Olusegun Obasanjo Presidential Center in Nigeria. Having said that, I would like to preface my remarks by saying that I have known the Stevens family for a very, very long time. During the early political years of Siaka Stevens, we lived in the same neighborhood of Sojatong. That's the local vernacular for Soldier Town, because it is the neighborhood of the old military barracks in Tower Hill. We went to the same church, the Evangelical United Brethren Church, then known as the EUB. where I participated in Sunday school and other church activities with 4 of the older Stevens children, James, Alex, Frances, and Mabel. So could I say we were buddies? Our church was the seat of power in those days. Samuel T. Mackay, the first prime minister, was also a member of the church along with other prominent members of the APC government, of the SLPP government. I mean the environment of APCs. As a young man, I witnessed some, of the behind-the-scenes machinations, of politics that fueled my youthful ambition of becoming a politician. Reverend Sylvanus Rena, the church pastor, at the time, was always brokering deals and settling disputes between the 3 prominent political figures of that day. Sir Milton, Sir Albert Mackay, who eventually became the second prime minister, and Siaka Stevens, who also became the 3rd prime minister and first executive president of the republic. My late wife, Comfort, was also closer to the family than I was by virtue of the fact that she lived directly opposite the street from them. Comfort, Frances, and Mabel were partners in crime together. She was also telling me about their useful escapades. Her best buddy, however, was Django, who she considered as brother. So Comfort and I consider ourselves friends of the family. I want to speak to you tonight, generally about the merits of a presidential center, and specifically about the benefits this diaspora initiative to Sierra Leone. I will give the benefits, then present a brief biological sketch of the political career of Siaka Stevens, documenting his rise to prominence and his subsequent emergence as president, as prime minister and president. I will conclude by raising hypothetical questions arising from his presidency that requires an extensive examination, giving the opportunities that will be created by the proposed presidential center, all in 20 minutes. If I were to give the title of my talk tonight, it would be this. And Mr. Chairman, you mentioned it. Is the Siaka Stevens Presidential Center desirable in Sierra Leone? If I were to give an answer, my answer would be an emphatic yes, just like you did. Any head of state who has had the greatest impact on the affairs of their nations, as Siaka Stevens certainly had, deserves close scrutiny, whether that impact was positive or whether that impact was negative. As Sierra Leoneans, we should always have an interest in preserving the records on how we live as a nation and don't leave it to others like you mentioned. Again, when Mr. Kuruma called to invite me to be the guest speaker tonight, I initially turned him down, not only because the notice was too short, but also because I consider it a daunting task, given the legacy of Siaka Stevens. But after careful consideration of the purpose of the event, I called Mr. Kuruma again 2 days later and accepted the invitation. Why? Because, number one, I thought it would be the patriotic thing to do. Number two, I quickly realized that contrary to what many may believe, the idea of a presidential center in Sierra Leone is a good thing, regardless of who it is named after. If put in its proper context, it is about Sierra Leone. It is about the many unanswered questions we have about our history.